Well, happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope you had a good Labor Day and you're ready to get back into the routine of everything today. We are in Numbers chapter 35, and just want to remind you that tomorrow we will begin reading the book of Acts chapter 1 in our Bible reading plan. We're skipping the last chapter in Numbers, chapter 36, because it basically says that they cannot transfer land from one tribe to another tribe if someone marries a person in a different tribe. So the land had to stay within the tribe that it originally belonged to. And so we're not going to be reading about that. You can on your own. But anyway, we pick up in the book of Acts tomorrow. Now, chapter 35 in Numbers, I imagine there are some of you listening to this who had never read Numbers chapter 35. It talks about cities that are designated for the Levites, and then it talks about the cities of refuge, and in so doing talks about murder and manslayer, which manslayer would be similar to us here in America, what we would call manslaughter, where there's not malice or intent when you kill someone. And we'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. Let's look at verses 1 through 3 first. He says, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan opposite Jericho." So they are camped on the east side of the Jordan River. The east side would be going away from the Mediterranean Sea, for those of you who are not big in geography, and what we would today would think of as the northern part of Jordan and the southern part of Syria. So they're camped over there, getting ready to cross the Jordan River into the promised land. And the land where they've camped, large areas south of them and to the north of them has already been divided between Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Now God speaks to Moses, and he says, "Command the sons of Israel that they give to the Levites from the inheritance of their possession cities to live in." So throughout all those tribes, all 12 of the tribes, there are to be designated cities for the Levites to live in. He goes on in verse 2, "And you shall give to the Levites pasture lands around the cities." Verse 3, "The cities shall be theirs to live in, and their pasture lands shall be for their cattle and their herds and for all their beasts." Now, we talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, but the 12 tribes are based on the 12 sons of Jacob. When it comes to the distribution of the land, though, not all 12 sons or descendants of those sons or tribes got land. Remember, Levi was one of Jacob's 12 sons, but they do not get a designated property as a tribe. So take Levi out, now you got the 11 boys, okay? Well, one of the 11 is Joseph, who has 2 boys, Manasseh and Ephraim. They become part of the tribes, 2 different tribes. They get land, okay? So there's 12 sons, but then you got the 13. It gets a little confusing. What happens is the Levites, rather than being a tribe who live together in this geographical area, the Levites, remember, they as a tribe became those who served at the tabernacle and later the temple. And then a subset of them, because Aaron and Moses were Levites, so a subset of the Levites, Aaron's sons, become the priest. So all Levites serve at the tabernacle, later the temple, but a subset of the Levites are the priest. So they don't get designated property. So what's going on? They are given designated cities. In fact, in verse 7, I think it is, there's 48 cities spread out among the tribes with the pasture land surrounding those cities in which the Levites live. You have to remember, they had multiplied, and in the years and centuries to come would continue to multiply to the point that they could not all be at the temple serving at one time. There would be too many of them. So they had these designated cities throughout the nation in the different tribes where they lived, and then they would, on a rotating basis, go to the tabernacle and in the future to the temple that Solomon built. or later the one that they rebuilt and that Herod expanded, the temple of Jesus' day, and they would serve. So they did that on a rotating basis. When they weren't serving in Jerusalem at the tabernacle or the temple, they were then in their designated city, and that was their property. It's where the Levites lived. So that's what he's talking about here. You have an example of that, for instance, at Christmas when you read in Luke chapter 2 about the birth of John the Baptist. Zechariah, his father was a priest, which means he was also a Levite, because all priests were Levites. And he's serving in the temple on his assigned time, his rotation. And when he's in the temple serving, an angel appears to him and tells him he's going to have a son and would name him John the Baptist. So that's all part of the Christmas story. And that's an example of what we're talking about here. Now, the cities of refuge are different, but similar. Here's the thing. Of the 48 cities that were set apart for the Levites, 6 of those 48 cities were designated as cities of refuge. That's verses 6 and 7. He said, the cities which you shall give to the Levites shall be the 6 cities of refuge which you shall give for the manslayer to flee, to. And in addition to them, you shall give them 42 cities. That's the 48 total of the Levites, but 6 of those 48 are cities of refuge. Verse 7, all the cities which you shall give to the Levites shall be 48 cities together with their pasture lands. Now, the cities of refuge, without reading all the verses, is essentially this. Someone kills someone, but it's not murder. It's not with malice. It's not intentional. It's an accident. He's a manslayer, similar to our manslaughter law. Someone has an accident and kills someone. It's not considered murder. It's considered manslaughter. And we have voluntary and involuntary manslaughter in America. And so what would happen is if someone was a manslayer or guilty of what we would say manslaughter, he would flee to one of these cities of refuge, and inside that city he was safe. There would be a trial. If he was convicted of murder, he would be executed. If he was convicted of manslaying, not murder, then his sentence was he had to leave his homeland, he had to leave his family, and he had to live in that city of refuge. Now, how long was this sentence? This is what's interesting. It was until the high priest, whoever the high priest was, when he was guilty of manslaying, whenever that high priest died, then he could go back to his home. So he might get lucky and the high priest die in 6 months or 2 years. He might get unlucky and the high priest live for another 10, 15, 20 years. But that's how his sentence was determined. Here's another caveat in this chapter. If the person guilty of manslayer leaves the city of refuge for any reason before the high priest dies, then relatives of the person killed by him have the right, without any consequence or any guilt, to kill him. Because think of him as an escaped prisoner. They didn't have prisons, so the city of refuge, i.e., was their prison. And if he leaves there, if he leaves his prison sentence before he's allowed to, then it's open season on him. That's how their judicial system worked. That's what this chapter is talking about. Now, some of you think, all right, Steve, what devotion are you going to get from this? Well, I don't know if it's a devotion so much as it is just a thought. Capital punishment and manslaughter. There are those who oppose capital punishment, and I understand their reasoning. I do not agree with them. I think capital punishment is biblical, and I think there are times capital punishment is the right thing. Now, this chapter talks more about manslaying, or what we would call manslaughter. And candidly, it does support the idea that someone who kills someone accidentally should not be treated the same way as someone who, with malice and intent, kills another person. In America, and it's there's federal law and state law on this, and usually it's the state laws that determine sentencing. Manslaughter, as I understand it, you have voluntary and involuntary. And involuntary usually is a lighter sentence than voluntary manslaughter. Won't get into all the weeds on that. But if someone drinks, gets drunk, gets behind the wheel of a car and drives, involuntary manslaughter. My only issue with how we do it in America is that sometimes I think the sentences for manslaughter are too lenient, especially when it comes to drunk driving. I don't think there's any excuse for a drunk driver who kills someone to be out of prison in 2 years. So that, I guess I'm being a little bit of a preacher and a politician right now and just a citizen. I think if you kill someone because you got drunk and got behind the wheel of a car, okay, it's not murder in the sense of intent and malice, but it deserves more prison time than 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And that's just my 2 cents worth. So I don't know if you'd call that a devotion, but that's kind of where my mind and heart went as I was reading this chapter. So that's just me talking to you. I'll see you tomorrow as we jump ahead to the book of Acts, chapter 1. God bless you, everybody. Have a great day.